Well, just a few weeks ago, Portuguese singer Salvador Sobral was an unknown artist waiting for a heart transplant. But on Saturday night, the 27-year-old took home the top prize in the Eurovision Song Contest held this year in Kiev. Hundreds of millions of viewers around the globe tuned in to watch the competition. Sobral's low-key performance of a love ballad beat more traditionally flamboyant acts. Well, Sobral arrived back to a hero's welcome in Portugal on Sunday. He was accompanied by his older sister, Luisa, who wrote the winning song. Hundreds of fans turned out at Lisbon Airport to welcome him home. The country has never won the competition before. Big deal for the Portuguese. Well, my next guest spent last week in Kiev at the Eurovision Song Contest. He co-authored the first book that has been described as the scholar's Bible on Eurovision. The book is called A Song for Europe. The co-author is here with me tonight on the show, Robert Tobin. Robert, it's good to have you on the show. So let's talk a little bit about what you experienced last week in Kiev. The motto was celebrate diversity. Is that what people were doing?
Well, they were celebrating music, of course, and there were honest efforts at diversity there, I would say. I think it's interesting linguistically. We had the winning songs, for instance, the Portuguese song, were not in English, so there were efforts to move out of the sort of English worldview. And we had songs, for instance, from Hungary that celebrated the Roma contributions to civilization. So there were definitely efforts, but there's a long way to go.
Okay, well, that's what was happening on stage. Yeah. Off stage, though, was a different story. You've written an article, and the media has also covered the controversy surrounding the arch, what's called now the Arch of Diversity in Kiev. Now, this is an arch that has become symbolic for just how far Ukraine has to go if it wants to call itself, European? Tell me about that.
Yes, right. So the arch was originally built in the Soviet era to celebrate the friendship between the Russians and the Ukrainians. So it's been renamed now the Arch of Diversity.
Which we're looking at right now.
Yes. And for the purposes of the Eurovision Song Contest, organizers wanted to paint it in the colors of the rainbow flag. Ultranationalists found out about this and stopped the painting. So what we get now is actually something that is, in my opinion, actually a fairly nice representation of where Ukraine is on the question of diversity for LGBT people.
Okay. And where is Ukraine? You said it's kind of unique. When you've got the nationalists, the far right, as well as the liberals, the pro-European camps. Both of these groups are invested in the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yes.
That's unusual.
That's very strange, yes. Ukraine has effectively used the Eurovision Song Contest in its battle against Russia. So the song that won last year, which is the reason why they are hosting the competition this year, is called 1944, and it is about the Soviet deportation of Tatars from Crimea, which of course Ukraine has occupied. Yeah. So Russia naturally took this as a critique. They responded by sending a singer who was then excluded from the competition because she had performed in Russian-occupied Crimea. So what has happened is Eurovision Song Contest is being used to sort of justify the Ukrainian position in the war.
Okay, and it's not the first time we've had a Eurovision Song Contest that's been politicized. But what is interesting, though, is it has allowed a lot of people, including yourself, to comment on how European Ukraine really is. Yeah. And how European is Ukraine?
Well, I think it's a deeply divided country, actually. We've seen in election after election in Ukraine that the split between the progressives and who are usually pro-Europe and the conservatives who are usually critical of Europe is about 50-50. So I think there are a lot of people there who are deeply devoted to European ideals of freedom, tolerance, and also respect for the LGBT community. And then there are others who are resistant to those ideas. So it does feel like it's on the margins of Europe.
Did you feel that you were geographically, but also in terms of identity, that you would reach the edge of Europe?
I did feel that somewhat. However, I want to add that we could go to many European countries and we could also go to the United States and find deeply divided populations.
Yeah. And what happens after the Eurovision Song Contest now for Kiev and Ukraine? I mean, we've got like 20 seconds. I mean, what do you see happening?
I believe this is part of incremental change. I am optimistic, actually, at heart. There are plenty of people who think that, no, nothing will happen. But I think, you know, there'll be a few more people who have seen the European ideals put in a positive light.
Well, we'll see if that indeed happens. Robert Tobin, co-author of A Song for Europe. Bob, it's good to have you on the show. We appreciate you coming in.
Wonderful to be here, Brett.
Thank you.